Hello, hello. Here we are with England on the 6th of February, 1484. When we last left off, um, we were finishing off Scotland here, and we still have Munster left and Ulster, and then we're gonna have to go to war with France this game. And yeah, I would be up for a game on the off time at some point. Not tonight, I think. Not tonight. But definitely sometime in the future. I'm still getting my grounding in this game back. I haven't played in a while before I started doing this stream, and I still kind of suck. Can everyone hear the soundtrack? That was something I was trying to do last time. Was get it to play the game audio. Oh, and I cleaned up Russia. That was just too much border gore for me to deal with, and a strong Denmark was just a horrific thought. Gonna have to make the king a general here. But yeah, the plan tonight is to hopefully get over to the New World. I sent an explorer out. There he is. And abandon the continent, because we're gonna Brexit ourselves right out of this situation, because these just aren't really worth my time holding once I get a hold of all of the British Isles. And we're right back to a 0-0. I think this run is cursed. But England in this time period wasn't doing all that great. They don't really start to emerge again as a serious power until roughly the late 16th, early 17th century when they start off getting their colonies in the New World. And if I remember right, England is roughly in the right range to get Bermuda. We might have to wait a little bit. Oh, we don't have a colonist yet either, so we gotta get one of those first. Good news is, I think we're gonna have a weak Spain this time around because Portugal has stopped them from expanding into Morocco. Granted, historically, Spain didn't take any of Morocco until the 19th century when its empire was dying fast. Spanish Morocco, right down here, was part of their later colonial empire. But at that point, they had lost control of the entirety of the New World, minus Cuba, Puerto Rico, and, well, they had the Philippines too, but they weren't in the New World. And then the U.S. took that from them soon thereafter, and the Spaniards had a rough time. Yeah, they were first out of the gate, but they were also the first to start declining of the great colonial powers. Yeah, no sense doing the soft colonial policy because if you're England, you should have the manpower to keep people stationed in the New World. And France has arguably the most powerful ability there. They have a plus 50% chance of native assimilation, and if you take the native trading policy, then you can uh, have 50% as well. And that means France has 100% chance of native assimilation, so they don't have to guard their colonies, and they'll grow pretty damn fast. Now, we're already very ahistorical, though. Scotland was actually enjoying something of a golden age during the 15th and 16th centuries. What's going on in Burgundy? Yeah, England does not have the manpower of the continental powers, so we're going to be waiting a little bit before we can really do anything. Our queen is really good, but our heir is horrible. Granted, English kings, they kind of ran the whole spectrum because you had a few really good ones like Richard the Lionheart, but then you had George, I believe it was the third during the American Revolution, and he was quite literally a drooling lunatic. Or was that the fourth? Monarchs, they reuse a lot of the same names. Not the most creative bunch. Even some noble families that have no royal claims whatsoever anymore. I mean, fun fact: the living descendants of both Napoleon and Wellington are alive and well in London, and they run rival. I believe it's their hedge funds, but yeah, Louis Christophe, I believe Napoleon. He's still around, and he actually bears some resemblance to his famous great 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 grandfather. Well, isn't that weird? Ireland is the hotbed of the Protestant Reformation. You don't see that every day. Martin O'Luther. That is one of those things where Ireland's religious history is a lot of things in Irish history tied up with England. It was one of the first places in Europe to adopt Catholicism wholeheartedly. And there was actually this interesting offshoot of the church called the Celtic Church, which kind of played fast and loose with a lot of church doctrine that's much more accepted today. For example, divorce was allowed. Women had a significantly larger role, and uh, divorces were more equitable. Like the woman couldn't leave the divorce with more than she had gone into it with. And that form of Christianity really survives quite a long time until the English really start having an interest in the island. And it kind of is forced to adopt more mainstream Catholicism. But following the full English conquest of the island and the English conversion to Protestantism, Ireland really clings to Catholicism as something to differentiate themselves from the English overlords. So I guess since I'm playing as Catholic England this go around, they're going Protestant to rebel against me, even though they're an autonomous vassal. I like you, Portugal, but I can't let you get those because you'll steal the colonies out from under me. There's Spain goes, actually, in Puerto Rico. Maybe I can grab Newfoundland. I just need a foothold. And that's the thing, historically, England was a very late arrival to the colonization game, even though they were very good at it. They were very good at murdering and oppressing, but they were very late, roughly 2.5 centuries after the discovery of the New World is when the first English colonies start showing up. I'll take the legitimacy hit. Alright, there we go. We got Scotland. But our manpower is still pretty low. It's interesting that they've allied Brittany. That's one of those interesting countries. No, they're not a country anymore. They're part of France. But historically, they were always kind of in the French sphere. But even during the days of Charlemagne, they were never absorbed into the empire. And culturally, they are interesting. They're Celts actually, who fled this part of Britain during the Anglo-Saxon invasion, which is this interesting return of the Celts to Gaul, because Gaul was originally Celtic before the arrival of the Franks, which is where we get modern France from. But when the Germans came to Britain, a lot of them fled down south across the Channel into Brittany, and they brought the insular Celtic languages to the mainland. Unfortunately, Brittonic is a slowly dying language. There aren't as many speakers of it as there are of a language like Welsh or even Gaelic. I'm going to need that missionary strength if Ireland is going Protestant. I'll tech up so I can get a call, or I'll get that idea so I can get a colony going. And Bermuda will be easy because there's no native inhabitants, except for some pigs actually that the Spaniards lost. So when the British got there, all they found were these wild boars that the Spaniards had left behind. How'd that happen? Austria must have lost a war, or no, Venice lost a war. Venice lost a lot of wars. These are some of those new states they added with the recent updates. And that's the funny thing about how the colonization of the New World worked out is the Spaniards got what looked like the most valuable land first. They got all the rich gold mines in Mexico and the coffee and chocolate plantations in South America. But these days, the east coast of the United States is the most valuable post colonial territory that you can find. I think the GDP of this particular region is would even without the entire rest of the United States would still be one of the largest in the world. I mean, really, it's almost a wonder that the colonization of the New World even happened because the British struggled to turn a profit until they discovered tobacco grew pretty darn well over here. And actually, they tried to ban tobacco. The king called it a stinking weed, but then they figured out how lucrative it was, and all of a sudden the king did not have as much of an issue with tobacco, and we're back to a crappy king. I usually like doing all the sea first, and then I'll start hitting the coasts because it takes a long time to even set up one colony. I was thinking of maybe spinning this off into an America run, but I don't know. I've never done an America game in EU4. That would depend on the Spanish colony. So the Caribbean was heavily settled, but there weren't as many Spanish settlers that went further inland into the jungles of South America. Um, and again, it really depended on where you were, because northern Mexico, you saw more Spaniards because there weren't many natives there to begin with. Um, it was largely empty, so the more Spaniards settled there. But there were more easily exploitable resources in the Spanish colonies, which is why they didn't bother really building an economy there. It was much harder to turn a profit up here, but once they got major trade cities like Boston, New York, Baltimore really going, the economy of the northern North America really took off. Really, actually, the French got the more easily exploitable resources in North America because they sent fur trappers down the Mississippi Basin and throughout northern Canada, and they actually cut in on Russia's borderline monopoly on the fur trade. Actually, that was the furs are the reason the Russians even went out into Siberia. There were more of them, and they later discovered even more resources out there. I believe Russia is sitting because of Siberia. Russia is sitting on the world's largest oil and natural gas reserves. They also found a lot of useful minerals out there: gold, iron. Uh, I don't want the prestige hit. Argentina was another one that was heavily settled by Spaniards. Again, because it was relatively empty when they got there. There weren't many native tribes in the region. Now, Chile was a different story. There were several native tribes there. But actually, Argentina's got a weird history when it comes to human migrations because later you get a crapload of Italians moving there. So some of the best pizza you can get outside of Italy, you can get in Buenos Aires. And then there's all the jokes about the Germans hiding out in South America. But that's a little outside of the scope of EU4's time period. But and there were useful resources for the British in North America. It was just harder to produce them because it was largely tobacco and other crops. Cotton in particular, actually. And it's part of why the British started expanding into India, but for the timing of that is because with the loss of North America, they needed access to land that could grow that cotton and tobacco, and they found that in India, which the Europeans had established a few trade ports there by that point, but few had really started expanding inland. And the British don't really tighten their grip on the whole of the subcontinent until the 19th century. Egypt was acquired much later, but it was one of the other really good cotton growing regions you could get to outside of the United States. Actually, it's funny, much later in history, the Confederates were certain that Britain and France would support them because they thought there was no replacement for American cotton, and the British were just went to India. The Confederates really overplayed their hand there. Their resources were not nearly as important as they thought they were. And see, the French have an interesting colonial history in America too. It's just much shorter. They were a later arrival, coming at the end of the 16th, early 17th century in Quebec and New Orleans, and Haiti to a degree as well. But most of the French settlers went to Canada or Louisiana, um, and they almost unintentionally set up the single most strategic city in North America because if you control New Orleans, you control the entire interior of the United States because you cut off the entire Mississippi basin, which is basically the whole of the Midwest. So France probably could have colonized more of the New World if they had really put their minds to it, but they had much more to focus on in continental Europe. I mean, they were dealing with Germans, Spanish, sometimes Italians. They were fighting pretty much everybody they bordered. All right, now we're going to sacrifice Normandy and Gascony to take Scotland. Just got to take out the Scottish Navy and then blockade the French from trying to land in England. I'll take that stability. There's no price difference, but I use my navy. That was fast. And these guys shouldn't put up much of a fight. I hate it when they do this. Once I give France that territory, Brittany and Holland should be pretty easy to piece out. Actually, returning to Spanish colonies for a moment, because of most of the resources the Spaniards got out of their colonies that weren't coffee or chocolate were precious metals, silver and gold. A lot of gold coming from Mexico, the former Aztec Empire, and a lot of silver coming out of Peru and what used to be the Incan Empire. And a lot of those ships sunk. So every once in a while, someone will discover a Spanish shipwreck, and then there becomes this issue over who owns the gold, the person who found it or the Spanish government. Even though this current Spanish, it is Spain is still technically a kingdom, but it's a bit like England in that the king has no real power. Um, but it's not. It's a very different kingdom from what it used to be. Um, let's give them land because I have no real interest in this. Okay, war reparations. What land do you want? Okay, that's fine. Alright, that gets France out of it. Gets easier now. And it allows me to not worry about the continent at all, which was historically England's greatest advantage is they're just really hard to invade. The island was always relatively small in terms of population and in manpower, but it's almost impossible for any other European power to actually invade it. Okay, we finally have a good heir. Let's hope he doesn't die, because that is what would happen in this run. We're cursed by RNGesus, I think. And once Scotland is dealt with, it'll just be Ulster all alone. Historically, Ulster was the dry run for New World's colonies for England. Before they spent all that money to make colonization work 3,000 miles away across the Atlantic, and I am already over force limit. Um, they started sending people into Ulster, and that's where a lot of the Ulster Scots came from. But, Ireland was the Mark One of the British colonial empire. I don't think we'll see a Netherlands either, which you don't usually because of their starting position. Um, it takes a specific set of circumstances to make them show up, but the Netherlands also was one of the kind of forgotten New World powers, and they founded New York. It used to be New Amsterdam, just like Istanbul used to be Constantinople, but that's nobody's business but the Turks. Um, the Dutch also had colonies in South Africa, and their biggest colony was Indonesia because they lost South Africa during the Napoleonic Wars, or yeah, during the Napoleonic Wars, because they got occupied by the French, and the English considered the occupied Batavian Republic to be an enemy combatant. Even though the Netherlands had been a historical friend to England, um, and they grabbed their South Africa colonies and just kind of decided to keep them after the war was over. Because before the Suez Canal, the Cape of Good Hope was really your main resupply point between Europe and Asia. And really, that's the whole cause of European colonization in the New World. It, it, it was an accident. They were trying to find a sea route to Asia because of the Turks. The Turks cut off all land routes between Europe and Asia because they didn't much like the Christians and they wanted to expand into the Balkans. So Portugal and Spain were in a very good position to start looking, see if there's another option. And along the way, they kind of accidentally discover the New World with Christopher Columbus. And yeah, that's going to be a pain. So we're going to send another colonist out there. And once we have some extra manpower we can throw at the problem, we will. Alright, Brittany should peace out now, so I'm going to send these guys home. Both their fortresses are taken. They're gone. But yeah, so they were trying to find a sea route to Asia to get at the valuable spices and other goods that came out of the region. Oh, they must have stacked wiped me. Crap. Alright, piece you out. Just take gold. Money's always nice. And it looks like they'll peace out too. And then we gotta restructure our army because we can't support as many men without the France territories. Take money from you, and let me see if I can get trade power. I can't. Oh, I'm on offer tribute. I shouldn't be. I can't get that, but I can get war reparations. That's fine with me. And now I should be able to eat all the rest of Scotland. Okay. Now army restructuring time. Because I don't have the force limit that I used to. Oh, well, I'm just about where I should be. So I'll split them in half. Send you up north. Recruit a new general, and we're good. Alright, now we just got Ireland. Take that. Yeah, we're behind on Diplo. We gotta tech up. See, after I saved. Oh, yeah, there goes Russia. Yeah, I couldn't deal with that border gore and strong Denmark. In this time period, Sweden became the dominant Nordic power under Gustavus Adolphus. There was a brief time when Sweden fought the entire rest of Europe, basically, during the 30 Years' War, and actually got the better of them most of the time. But once Russia really got its feet under it and started focusing on the West, there was really nothing Sweden could do against the sheer Russian Zerg rush. And I do believe that is the technical name for it. Because Russia has always had enough people to throw at the problem. Especially considering that the next most populous nation would have been Germany, and it took them forever to unite. Holy crap, look at Ireland go. Two of the centers of the Reformation are in Ireland. This is. I have never seen this happen. Be on the lookout to see if I can. There we go, missionary strength. I don't want to absorb Leinster just yet. And of course, they're allied with Denmark. Freaking Denmark. I'll move those guys to Ireland just to be ready. Because once my truce is up with Munster, I'll go back to war over there. Which will be 13 years. So I'll just focus on the New World until then. Speaking of, I should train a garrison for Jamaica. I'm a little bit over force limit, but it's just going to be one extra unit. And that's it for exploration missions. Usually building markets and other trade buildings is not really worth your time, but when you are in an end node like the English Channel, it is very worth it. Especially because you do have some other major powers here, like you got France and the Netherlands if they form, but England will almost always end up being the dominant trade power here. But all three of the end nodes are in Europe, which a lot of trade flowed. Eastern Mediterranean was Venice, Western Mediterranean was Genoa, and most of the New World wound up in Britain, and I didn't get the institution who did. Of course, the Spaniards did. It's not a huge deal, it's just a nice boost. You get 100 of each type of point. Mm, yeah, I need to tech up in Diplo. These ships need to repair. They split off the cargo fleet. Okay, and I mean, you're probably gonna end up fighting Denmark at some point, which they're pushovers at this point in the game. Sweden is well, Sweden really wants to break away. Um, that almost always happens in the early game, which it did historically. Sweden broke away. There was a brief time when all three Nordic countries were part of the same country. It was the Kalmar Union, which the city is, yeah, there it is, Kalmar, and it was usually dominated by Denmark because at the time they were the strongest Nordic power. And it's each of the Nordic countries got their time as the most powerful. During the medieval era, the high medieval era, Norway was the powerhouse of the Nordic countries. Um, Even though it's the least geographically unified, it's very mountainous, and for a long time in the Viking Age, it was just individual little Viking towns all along the coastline that would raid. But once it formed into a kingdom, it got powerful enough that a few times Norwegian kings came very close to controlling England. And then Denmark becomes more powerful in the high medieval era because they control all the trade that flows out of the Baltic here. They could shut it down if they wanted to, and it wouldn't even require that powerful of a navy, which Denmark had a decently powerful one. And then Sweden is the third one to really take off, which they did during the 30 Years' War. And that was largely due to some very innovative military thinking that actually Napoleon borrowed heavily from Swedish military thinkers. King Carolus was one of the best ones, and you also have Gustavus Adolphus in there as well. And again, if you thought thinking of France as a military power was weird, Sweden used to be one of the dominant military powers in Europe. We have a competent cousin. Oh, not as funny as it is in Crusader Kings. Free center of trade increase. That's very nice. And see, this is also very ahistorical. The British took Jamaica from the Spanish. The Spanish used to control the whole of the Caribbean. The English took Jamaica in a war. The French took Haiti in a war. Uh, Turks and Caicos, and then the Lesser Antilles. Well, I should say, all the big islands in the Caribbean were at one point controlled by the Spanish. What happened to Austria? Well, they've got Hungary, which that's good. When that doesn't happen, usually the Ottomans grow out of control here. But the Ottomans have been really weak lately. They used to be just this huge puke green blob on the map, but for a while they've been getting a little weaker. Now they struggle to take over Egypt, and historically at this point the Ottomans would have been well on their way to conquering Egypt. they wound up encountering a similar problem to the Romans in that Persia is very difficult to conquer. Actually, it's almost a wonder Persia became an empire too, even though they were one of the first ones. Just geographically, they are not a very smooth country. Like, it's very mountainous, pretty divided internally. And yet they formed arguably the world's first empire. There was a time when half of all the human species lived under the rule of the Persian emperor. I will take that so I can avoid Scotland breaking away. Anything I can do to avoid these rebellions is kind of a pain. That's one of the other annoying things is they really kind of got the Treaty of Tordesillas wrong. I understand the mechanic they're trying to put in, but realistically, the Treaty of Tordesillas was a one-time thing between Portugal and Spain, mediated by the Pope. Because the Portuguese expanded out of Iberia first, and they knew they could never militarily stand up to the Spanish, they sought to the Pope's intervention, and because they wanted guarantees for what they had discovered through these sea routes. And the Pope, who actually was a Spaniard at the time, split the world roughly here. Roughly. Portugal got everything to the east of that line, and Spain got everything to the west, which is why the Portuguese had Brazil, even though it was in the New World. But it kind of set the direction for the colonization of both countries. Spain was much more focused on the New World, while Portugal backed off of their New World colonies until this. Okay, well we got a good queen. That's actually pretty good for us. We're gonna need the missionary strength. Anyway, but that's why Spain focuses almost entirely on the New World, and Portugal focuses almost entirely on the Old World, with the noted exception of Brazil. And actually, here's how rich the Portuguese were in their time when the French showed up to try to colonize Brazil. They literally just paid them to get out. Like it's the "I will give you $100 to fuck off right now" meme come to life. It's like I talked about in the episode today. The money printer go burr meme is about as old as currency itself. Since we've had money, for whatever reason, people have got it into their heads, you can just keep printing more of it and it'll be fine. But it's never fine. It always backfires. But people always try it. I've never understood this. I've studied this happen in numerous countries, but they always do it. And it always backfires. It backfired on Rome. Uh, it's even easier now with paper money, so it's just more likely people will do it. If you were printing or minting as many coins as you could mint, then oh, there we go, Protestants. They'll be easy to deal with. Anyway, if you're minting coins, you have to debase them using, well, base metals. This is what the Romans did, and it did not work out well for them. But paper money, you can just crank that out. And I can tell you, as a historian, it is literally worked 0 times for any countries trying it. Works almost as well as taking out huge amounts of national debt, which is what caused the French Revolution in many ways. The French ran themselves into bankruptcy, helping the Americans wage the Revolutionary War. And when those bills came due, they came due for the French people, and the country's economy went into the shitter. And even though she probably actually never said it, the "let them eat cake" was prominent propaganda. Even though Marie Antoinette never actually said that, as far as we know. There's a lot of propaganda about the French Revolution that isn't really true. There we go, London Stock Exchange, which didn't, well, the Dutch had the first one, but we'll take that money, that's nice. And I should be able to get a level 3 center of trade here. I'll boost Calais, but I might not be able to hang on to it. Boost my North Sea trade as well. Muscovy's being slow. I find that even if the Russians expand territorially, they usually slow down because they get very behind in technology. I just can't get over England or Ireland as the hotbed of Protestantism. It just feels weird to say. Oh, there we go. We got some reformed centers showing up in Germany. Aachen and Ansbach. Aside from Ireland and Brittany, this is a relatively weak Protestant Reformation. Some games, Protestantism will take over the whole of Europe, even Spain and Portugal. Sometimes it's like this, where if it kind of gets stuck on a place like Ireland, where it then never spreads too far outside of it. Losing Great Austria. That's because I'm behind on the institution. Not worth taking out 5 loans for, I don't think. Let's be ignorant. That always works too. Okay, we can probably move this colonist. Send him to Boston. Ship him up to Boston. Which I love Boston. One of my favorite cities. I've been a few times. It's beautiful. Underrated, I think. Of course. Oh, that's perfect. Crap. Well, looks like we've got to train a new one. And once we get him over there, we can go to war for Ireland and we'll fight Denmark. Pause for a second and top off my whiskey. Once again, I'm drinking the Sexton. Really, really good. They don't pay me for this, I swear. I just really like the whiskey. Alright, ship him over to Jamaica. Not the Isle of Man. That's not good. Now they're getting down to the developed parts of my country. This run is cursed. I really think this run is cursed. Might be able to explore something soon. Always good to keep one on hand in case some new exploration missions open up. That's great. And we got a regency. Oh, this is just perfect. All right, there we got the king. And a decent heir. I can't wait for them both to die. We can probably go back to a balanced. Eh, yeah, let's educate the poor people. The Spaniards are really going gangbusters in the Caribbean. I mean, they did historically. The British hadn't beat them to Jamaica at that point. That never happened. Portuguese Texas. I find the Spaniards aren't as aggressive as they were historically. The Spaniards were very aggressive historically. They claimed literally the whole, and that colonist is done. They were very mad when other Europeans started showing up to get in on that oppression game. I'll take the prestige. Catherine of Aragon is interesting historically, but I don't really need the advisor right now. Send him back to Boston. The colonization will continue until morale improves. Get that military tech. I'm sad that I'm behind. England is one of the better technological countries. I mean, they get a lot of coal at the late game, but I'm behind because we start with that idiot Edward VI messing up our whole damn run. Let's get them. And this is about the Schwartz of Riders that we just saw. This is about the time that gunpowder really takes off as something you see very often in European warfare. Um, at this point, the pikes and muskets are the dominant weapons on the battlefield. But um, you start seeing cavalry show up with pistols, which is interesting, and it's kind of the basis of the later dragoons, which were a pretty common unit of Napoleonic warfare. But the Black Riders that we're talking about they would ride around with a rack of pistols on their chest and just draw and fire each one in succession. Relatively close range. You wouldn't want to shoot anything long distance with those pistols. They were pretty useless past maybe 25 yards. Oh yeah, no, we're fine. Just relatively behind for Europe. Actually, I caught up, but I'd like to be ahead. All right, there we go. Now we should be able to hang on to Boston. And you're right. I don't think I've ever actually seen Spain take Mexico. I've played a lot of hours at EU4, but weirdly enough, I don't think I've ever seen that happen. And yeah, you're right. That is the technical name, but firearms were present on the battlefield at this point. And if I'm not mistaken, the I'll take tax modifier. If I'm not mistaken, it was the arquebus used a fuse lock. So it was literally just a lit piece of fuse that the rifleman would load into the lock of his weapon, and the trigger just lowered the fuse into the pan. I would be up for that maybe sometime this week. We could do an evening stream if you're up for that. Again, it's kind of funny that Spain never takes Mexico because that New Spain was like the jewel of the Spanish Empire. That was one of their most lucrative colonies. What mod? I've got a couple of mods on right now. Um, I have a flag mod. I could find the specific one for you. I have a border mod that actually gives you like the borders of U.S. states, and it allows you to do a German Empire border. Um, and then I've got a couple of unit packs on, and the Great Exhibition is the other one I've got on, and that gives you historical paintings as event pictures. I think if they get a couple colonies in there, they do. Um, it's just usually Portugal beats them to it. Oh, I also have a mission mod that the missions expanded, but I'm playing with the standard paradox missions. I'll take quantity. England needs it. And Great Britain, new traditions, and we get the Union Jack, which, even as an American, is one of the dopest historical flags. Why does Portugal not like me? Maybe I can fix that. Okay, they are just allied with Ulster now. We can knock them out pretty quick and start integrating our Irish lands. Yeah, it is. Every mod I'm using in this playthrough is on Steam Workshop. Because I don't like the base game English flag, because it was only used for a short period of time um, during the Hundred Years' War, which it would be historically accurate, but the St. George's Cross is the historical flag of England, and even today it's still the flag of England as a separate country is St. George's Cross. I also like that it gives you the saltire for Scotland. Yeah, I'll revoke that. I'm gonna absorb them anyway. Right, who revolted? Oh yeah, no, it's that flag. If I might be wrong here, but I think it was just the personal banner of the kings during the Hundred Years' War to reinforce their claim on the French throne, because it had the fleur de lis in it, and at that point, that was what they were fighting over. But St. George's Cross is the actual flag of England and has been for a very long time. It's not used very much in modern England. Like if you go to London today, you see the Union Jack, not St. George's Cross. But I like St. George's Cross, and you only get the Union Jack if you have it first. And you can see it in the middle. We can train them. This war is going to be easy. I'll take that clergy loyalty, and I can afford it. How are our New World colonies doing? Has he arrived? Oh, I must have. The export minorities. It messes me up every time because I forget to do that extra step because I played this game for a long time with just the send colonist button. I will publish a mod list. I will find the name of it for you, and I will publish a mod list. Um, can't remember it off the top of my head. I've used two different ones when one of them stopped getting updated. I know the one I can remember off the top of my head is something like Ordo Heraldica Regum et Ducum, I think. That's a good one. That also uses a lot of historical flags. This one isn't that though. I just can't think of the name. So yeah, once I log off for the night, I'll publish the mod list. That might be it actually, historical flag mod. I also like the Russian flag in that mod. They use the red, white, and blue tricolor with the imperial eagle on it. Okay, now we can start integrating Ireland. And then the unit packs are they're all from a guy called Angelo X7, something like that. But he has good unit packs because they change based on. Of course, we're getting this run is cursed, but he has good unit packs that they actually will change. So you'll have different units in Europe, America, Africa, and Asia. I might as well just go Protestant then, if this is how it's going to be. I just hate that you lose 100 prestige. I should be able to get it back pretty quickly because we're colonizing and you get prestige for every colony. Hmm. And I'll control two of the three because they showed up in Ireland. I'll do what we always do, we save. They added in Anglicanism, but it's a mechanically very weak religion, so I don't use it much. Orthodoxy is really where it's at. That is mechanically the strongest religion. It's part of why Russia is such a powerhouse in this game. But I don't want religious turmoil. That is a horrible disaster. Yeah, no, it's fun. It's the fun kind of OP where you can just get the icon of Saint Michael makes wars just child's play as Russia. Uh, Protestantism's okay, so I'll deal with it. It's better than Anglicanism. Anglicanism, I know they added it in a DLC, but it's still one of the weakest religions. Yeah, I mean, two front wars are always painful. Yeah, we need that burger loyalty. I usually try to avoid the army tradition ones. Mm, I'll take the professionalism hit. I mean, yeah, but I do like the extra discipline you can get with Protestantism. That makes Prussia just absurd. Prussian Space Marines are real. So yeah, I mean, yeah, colonial wars get messy, especially if you're fighting both Spain and Portugal at the same time. Just because they get over there so early, their colonial nations are usually much more developed than yours. I had this one years ago. I had this one Prussia game. I remember it fondly because I wound up conquering almost the entirety of Europe. Prussia is stupidly OP, especially with the militarism mechanic that they added in, because then you can just power your military machine with any excess military power you have. But it's also one of the harder ones to form. Like both Brandenburg and the Teutonic Order got eaten up, and that's more likely to happen to you if you're not particularly good playing them. Because Brandenburg is really weak, which they were historically. Brandenburg, this part of Germany was dense forests and nothing else. Um, oh, there we go. But no, northern Germany, that at least that part of northern Germany was forests and little else. Most of northern Germany's economy was based in the Hanseatic trade cities, which were Lubeck, Hamburg, and a handful of others. But really, it was just this trade network on the Baltic that enriched northern Germany. But Brandenburg was landlocked and cut out of it. Brandenburg doesn't get really powerful until they have a union with the Duchy of Prussia, which at the time was under the control of the Polish monarchy as a sort of semi autonomous vassal state. But once that happens, and you get the Hohenzollern dynasty has some actual land to work with, because the East Prussia gave them access to the ocean through Königsberg. Um, and that's when you get Frederick the Great, which is really the beginning of powerhouse Prussia. Silesia was also valuable, but you also have the Rhine up here in northern Germany, which even today is the heart and soul of German industry. Like it's always been the German Empire and later the Third Reich had a significant weakness in that a lot of their industrial base was right here, really easy to get to. This part was never as heavily in. Oh, there goes Austria. What are they doing? Okay, they were just absorbing Bohemia. But Silesia was also very rich. As part of why the Prussians went to war over it. But that was one of Frederick the Great's early expansions, was the war over Silesia, and that was one of the first times a significant challenger to Austria rose in Germany. Development's good if you're Prussia, if you're playing tall. Sometimes England, you got to have the land for it. It's Berlin in this game is sitting on forest terrain, so it's not particularly useful developing it. But France, if you want to play a tall France, which can be fun. Um, oh yeah, that was the first time they became a world power. But the first time they challenged Austria was when they took over Silesia. Um, they didn't become significantly powerful until they basically absorbed all of modern Poland minus Krakow. That is a tough one. A lot of southern Britain works. There we go. What do I do? Screw it. We'll fight the heretics. This run is beyond cursed. Because I should be able to convert the rest of England pretty quickly. Because I'm on 5 month conversions, which is absurdly fast. Granted, it's a lot easier to convert during the Protestant Reformation than at any point during the entire rest of the game. I would fight these guys one on one, but with my prestige as low as it is, I need a numerical advantage. Yeah, that is. Uh, Low prestige is the worst. Alright, there we go. But no, that is a really tough achievement to get, mostly because of Northern Scotland. Most of Britain isn't all that hard to develop. Let's see if I have my terrain map mode. Yeah, most of this is fine. You have the marshlands, but it's the Scottish Highlands that are the hardest to develop. Yeah, there France goes. If the Burgundian inheritance doesn't happen, they will absorb them by force, especially if they consolidate like this. Yeah, but the Highlands up here, what is that? What does that dev cost increase? Yeah, it's a plus 20% dev cost. So if you're not lucky with kings, that can be hard. I'm surprised the Livonian Order is stuck around this long. Oh, okay, I didn't know that. I usually play with mods to help with historical immersion, so I don't usually do many achievement runs. And there goes Mexico to Portugal, as always. They actually changed the. Oh yeah, I've got the whiskey rocks tonight. But they actually changed. This used to just be called Portuguese Mexico, which really was bad for immersion. But they now they've got New Portugal. I think there is a state of New Mexico in this game. There we. You know what? We're already in such a weird place religiously. Let's just go full bizarre. Screw it. This run's cursed. I'm gonna go weird. That sounds like an awesome version of GeoGuessr. Because usually I'm stuck going down the road until we get one. Yeah, I figure screw it. If we're not going to be fighting wars in Europe, why not fight civil wars? That's appease the traditionalists. Bringing in marriable women, that is something that actually the French did historically. They were called Le Filles de Roy, and a lot of French Canadians can trace their lineage back to them because French America was a sausage fest. Almost all the colonists were dudes who came there to get rich on the fur trade. But when the French decided they actually wanted control of the territory, they needed to have a sustainable population. So the French king rounded up a couple hundred women and sent them off to the colony. And yeah, a lot of French Canadians can trace their lineage back to them. But most of the Frenchmen in Canada took native brides. There just weren't enough French women there. Also, Le Fille de Roy means the daughters of the king. Putting that high school French to use. Dr. Peace would be so proud. I also remember Baguette and Will You Sleep With Me? But there's an ABBA song about that one. Thing is, I've been to France and that didn't help me with the language much. I am very bad at languages. There we go. About to get a new government reform. I These are kind of a goofy addition that they made because they don't really add much. Um, they're there, but it's about all I can say about them. Yeah, let's get weird religiously in England. Let's just get as weird as we can get. Alright, Boston is self sustaining. Now we can start colonizing the North American coast. Might get a second colony going up in Canada too. Newfoundland. There we go. Got a conquistador too. Um, yeah, I don't want my heir becoming Walloon because, well, that would just make everything more divided than it already is. Let's send the conquistador. That is such a nice thing that they let you just auto explore the Americas. That would be so painful. if you had to manually explore every province. All right, I think we got the religious disorder under control for the time being. I'll take the national unrest guy. I'll take that yearly prestige too. That'll be nice. Um, so that's the funny thing is we've already got a parliament as the English monarchy. Um, do we combine it with royal decree? That could be kind of funny. Production efficiency would probably be the most useful, especially once we get coal going. Why are we losing money? Could be my missionaries. Oh, now we can start converting Protestant territories. Yeah, once we take out that center of Reformation, we have to integrate Ireland first. But once we take out that center of Reformation, it should get easier to just do an Anglican run. I didn't intend on this. I was trying to just do a Catholic Britain, but this run is cursed, so I'm just saying screw it. Let's take empiricism, scientific revolution. We're only losing one gold per month, so that's not a huge deal. Brittany's Protestant. That is odd. This is a weird game. Of course it would be. Russia's looking beefy. Alright, there we go. Should start to colonize much faster now. What do we got here? Protestant zealots. Cool. Yeah, I've just kind of accepted this run's going to be a mess. Um, RN Jesus has decided he will curse me this game. So fun, fun. Is that the only state I have? Okay, that must be the only one I haven't. And Berlin. We don't even have Henry VIII, but chop her head off. That's what Henry VIII would have done. He was a weird guy. The funny thing was, he kept blaming the women for the sex of his baby, even though it's the man who does that. Like it's that's what happens. But he blamed the woman every time, and I believe he went through 5 wives. You can go see his armor at the statue at the Tower of London. They have his whole armor collection, and they had just huge cod pieces on them, which is hilarious. um, I highly if you ever find yourself in London, go to the Tower of London and look at Henry VIII's armor collection. They are hilarious. London is I like London. It's not my favorite place I've been in Europe, but I really do like London. Yeah, he was. I don't know what a good. Trying to think of a good meme term for Henry VIII, but I can't think of anything. He definitely wasn't an incel, but maybe a primitive MGTOW, maybe one of those. Kings going their own way. Right before I kill these dudes, I'm gonna pour myself one more glass of whiskey, and that'll probably be it for the night. And for those of you who recently joined us, this is what you gotta get, the Sexton. It is great. I'm totally not aiming for a sponsorship. I wouldn't say no to one, but I'm not aiming for one. Yeah, I don't care. Clergy's gonna do what they're gonna do. Ireland's almost integrated. That'll be good. Should be able to tech up soon as well. What's going on in the New World? We're going slow. Like this. RNGesus, pray for me. See, part of the reason England can get real powerful is they have access to the parliament can give them a fourth colonist, and usually Spain is the only country that can get a fourth colonist. Pretty much everyone else is capped at 3, but yeah, that I'm been waiting for Sweden to break out. Usually they have done at this point. They have the Liberty Desire to. Um, Historically, after Scotland broke away from Denmark, the Danes and Swedes basically traded Norway between them. For a little while, it was the Kingdom of Denmark, Norway, and then it was the Kingdom of Sweden, Norway, because Denmark was always the least populous of the three and had the least geographical cohesion, so it usually just found itself under the control of either Sweden or Denmark. I still think it's the least populous of the three. I could be wrong, um, but I think Sweden has about 10 million people in it. And Denmark has about 5 or 6, and then actually Norway might be about the same as Denmark. I know it's like 5 or 6 million. Denmark can be a fun colonization game in EU4. I mean, they did do it historically. This used to be the Vinland colony. It just didn't last all that long. It was too cold for the Vikings. There we go. Give me that money. But that's Ireland integrated. Just going to delete these fleets. And we can start converting. Hooray. Actually, fun fact about the Nordic countries, Iceland is one of the few countries that had no indigenous population before the Norwegians showed up. Um, there were just no people on the island anywhere. They never got there. So, like when humans first started expanding throughout the world, they just never made it to Iceland. It's too far away. The water's too cold. But at a certain point, I believe it was three settlers stayed behind from the first Norwegian voyage to the island. Actually, no, there were a few isolated Irish monasteries up there before. Um, People trying to emulate Jesus's 40 days and nights in the desert by going off to a frozen hellscape. Um, but they were all dudes, so they didn't have a reproducing population. So your first like determined colonists who wanted to establish a society on the island showed up when the Norwegians showed up. Yeah, all dudes could be a good historical meme for this show. History's kind of a sausage fest, mostly because a lot of the women get forgotten, like this one. Uh, I'm bad at Celtic pronunciation, but I've listened to enough of the Dubliners to know that that's pronounced something like Gronnywale. Let's see. A woman known as Gronnywale has arrived in our court to petition the release of her sons Tibbet Burke and Murrow O'Flaherty and her half-brother Donal na Puopa, Queen of Umil, chief of the O'Male clan. O'Malley? Maybe O'Malley. I'm bad at languages. I'm really bad at Celtic languages. Stood the siege, arrived, and the English were beaten back. A lot of the tough women from European history actually came from the Celts. You have Boudica and Gronnywale. I'll just release the prisoners, take that prestige, and take the money. Boudica's a fun one, though. Look her up if you get a chance. Queen of the Iceni, wife of King Prasudicus. The Romans killed her husband and raped her daughters, and then raped and beat her. So she decided to kill a lot of them. Took like 2 or 3 entire legions to stop her. Londinium, modern day London, was the Roman city, but there used to be a Celtic city called Camulodunum near here that was occupied by the Iceni, who were a tribe that lived in ancient southern Britain. They weren't Anglo-Saxons, though. The Anglo-Saxons came later. The Iceni were one of the many Celtic tribes that used to live in Britain. So, interesting thing is the Germans are a pretty recent thing, or Germanic-based peoples were kind of a recent thing in European history. Um, the Celts were the dominant people for a long time in Britain, Ireland, Gaul, even Hispania, and they had a massive expansion where the Celts got as far as modern day Turkey. And if you've ever read the Bible, the Galatians mentioned in the Bible were actually a Celtic group isolated in central Anatolia after the wave of Celtic peoples receded back to their homelands in Gaul and Britain. You also have a group called the Boii who were isolated in Germany. You have pockets of them that stick around, and then you have a group that intermarries with the Iberians, who are a different ancient ethnic group that occupied modern day Spain, Portugal, and Aragon or Andorra. Um, they aren't around anymore. They got replaced by the Germanic invaders that showed up. Yeah, the Germans used to be further east, and then the Slavs were even further east than that. The Germans were pushed west by the Slavs, who were themselves pushed by climate change largely. Um, but there haven't been Germans living in this region for a while. Uh, this is also part of the Nordic countries were also part of the ancient Germanic homeland, but they moved as well. There was a great age of migration as the Roman Empire fell to the ground that saw most of modern Europe take shape. At least in its very primitive forms, because you have the earliest ancestors of the French show up, the earliest ancestors to the Spaniards, and the modern Germans and the Dutch and the English all show up. They all are part of the Germanic migration, and you'll hear all about this in the podcast. And I believe I've got that scheduled for episode 5 or 6 is when I'll be talking about the pressure from the Germanic barbarians. Yeah, right now we're still on the tail end of the Pax Romana with the decline under the Severan dynasty, who were the last good dynasty of the old empire. Because once you come to the other side of the crisis of the 3rd century, the Roman Empire is looking very different. In terms of structure, language, ethnic makeup, it's very different. Um, the crisis of the 3rd century changes everything, and you'll hear all about that in episode 3. But on the other side of the crisis of the 3rd century, Rome is beaten back to the western side of the Rhine. They used to have a province called Lesser Germany, which was right about here. But during the crisis of the 3rd century, they lose it, and then they never get it back. Crisis of the 3rd century also sees the proliferation of Christianity across the empire. It had been actively suppressed by the pagan government of ancient Rome, but when the pagan government of ancient Rome is busy fighting with itself, they can't really focus on this troublesome religious minority. And, well, when lives get short, as they did during the crisis of the 3rd century, because once the government starts collapsing and into various civil wars, you start seeing famines and plagues and all this awfulness. And in all honesty, the Roman afterlife doesn't offer you much if you're just an irregular schmuck. So Christianity gave you a far better deal in the afterlife. Eternal paradise sounds a lot better than just the fields of asphodel, which were just kind of a pale imitation of of your life. So why not follow this new religion that promises paradise in a eternity when your own life is ridiculously short by comparison? Um, and that's kind of how Christianity grows to become one of the dominant religions in the empire. Ooh, we got a great war. I'm not getting involved. Anyway, so you'll hear all about that in episodes 5 and episode 5 is going to be about Christianity after the crisis of the 3rd century. Um, And it might be interesting for many of you to hear, but the early hotbeds of Christianity weren't anywhere in Europe. It was Egypt and Anatolia. Some of the world's oldest churches can be found in Anatolia, and the world's oldest monastery is on the southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula. Because the early monastics were just a bunch of crazy dudes going out in the desert to worship Jesus. Um, some of them are pretty cool. You have Saint Simeon the Stylite, Sir Saint Simon the Stylite, who once berated a Roman emperor to his face. Yeah, Roman history starts getting real weird after the crisis of the third century. It's less there's less orgies and other crazy pagan Roman shit, but a lot more just bizarre happenings. Um, During that same period, and you'll hear about this in a future episode. Alexandria becomes the hotbed of a religious conflict between the pagans, the Christians, and the Jews who had been in Alexandria for a while. They all are killing each other. They all hate each other, and it's brutal. But in the midst of it all was a very famous mathematician called Hypatia, and she was abnormal because she taught both Christians and pagans, and she wound up getting killed in the violence. She's the counterpoint to the history is all dudes. Hypatia is fascinating, brilliant mathematician, woman from roughly 4th century Egypt, one of the Greeks of Alexandria. Why are these guys not exploring? Okay, they must not be able to get through them. Damn. Well, I guess he's stuck there. The tribe will migrate eventually, and it'll be able to move. I will eventually be able to convert these Protestant provinces to Anglican. It'll just take a little while. In the meantime, it's just unrest. It's just easy enough to deal with, especially if you don't have any pressing external threats. Let's see, what can we build? Uh, you only usually want to build those when you get +2 or +0.2. That makes so they pay for themselves by the end of the game. If you do that, there we go. Lothian +0.27. That's roughly about the time you want to start building those. We converted Connaught. We gotta get Leinster and Ulster, but we probably won't be able to for a little while. And I don't want to take religious ideas. It's not particularly useful as England because you're not expanding into a whole lot of wrong religion territory, where you'll have to convert it before you can really take it. Because usually, if you conquer, oh, there goes Russia. But anyway, if you're conquering India or someplace in Asia, you're just going to want to set up trade companies. Then you won't have to bother with converting it or changing the culture or anything. That's a lot easier. All right, these heretics are getting expensive. All right, if we do this, we should be able to convert some things. There we go. As I said before, I'm not the greatest EU4 player. I like it for the history, though. Yeah, I'll take those free colonists. In Connecticut. Connecticut's nice, just don't get lost around, where is it, Greenwich. Especially at night. It is a very difficult town to navigate. I was once going on one of my trips up to Boston. I wound up getting lost in Greenwich, and it was horrible. Yes, my girlfriend still won't let me live that one down. Yes, it was raining, and it was terrifying uh, because we were talking about witches all the way up and the Salem witch trials. It was fun, fun stuff. Which that was a wild, wild fucking time. The Salem witch trials. Sort of the first moral panic. If you're familiar with the Satanic Panic of the 1980s, a bit like that, but with a lot more fire. Um, yeah, the people would just rat out on their neighbors. It was wild. They were worried that like the cat was worshiping the devil or some stuff. There's a whole museum about it in Salem now, and actually that's a fun trip. If you get the chance, go visit Salem. It is a adorable little town in Massachusetts, and adorable little town in Massachusetts, and it's actually got a very old Orthodox church that was a gift from the Tsar of Russia because a number of Russian fishermen had settled in the town. Oh, the whiskey's getting to me. That might have been why I decided to convert to Anglican. Just decided to say, screw it. Screw it, we're doing Anglican. Get in, losers, we're converting to Anglican. Still not ready, so I'll take that and that. Yeah, there's this big gap in technology right now. So I'm just taking ideas. Once you get three idea groups going fully, that's when you get your full set of national ideas. And I'll take land maintenance. There we go. And we got that discipline. Got some Norwegian separatists. Violent Norwegians in Orkney. All right, Rhode Island colony's done. We're almost at the point where we get our own Treaty of Tordesillas for the North America. But I'm gonna want to take this before the Portuguese get in there. Oh, that's why the name's different. I have a mod on. It's actually this really cool mod called New World Colony Names, that where they translated every province in the New World to match different languages. So no more random names for provinces. They actually have a historical basis. But they also changed the names of the colonies too. So that's why we have Nova Portugal. And that's why this province has changed its name. None of the South American ones do for France. Also, that's interesting. France getting involved in South America. Yeah, I need that missionary. Diplo. I'll support populists. Take that prestige hit. Placate clergy. And they have a bit too much. Praise local regiments. Grant local autonomy. Yeah, screw it. I'll placate the merchants. They don't control that much land anyway. Yeah, this the religious problem will fix over time. And we got Protestant zealots. That's cool. Take you guys off of training. Yeah, they need to get down here. Thing is, once you've united the British Isles, England plays a little bit like Portugal, where it just becomes this nice laid back colonization game. You can do a lot of stuff as England, but one of the most fun things is just sitting back and colonizing the whole wide world, because that's what Portugal does. There it goes. Alright. Honestly, this game keeps going the way it has been. I might switch to Portugal. That's an interesting history, and one that doesn't get a whole lot of credit. New World, the modern world doesn't exist without Portugal, is the thing. And for a little while, Lisbon was the jewel of Western Europe and the Atlantic Ocean. I've heard Portugal referred to as Europe's foreskin, but it's way more than that. You don't get the trade routes to Asia. You don't get America, actually. Kind of attribute the desire for the Spaniards to explore out into the New World. Um, it largely comes from Portugal, who would beat them to the punch. Can we convert anything? Oh, there we go. All right, it's speeding up. All right, now we're cooking with Anglicanism. More rebels. I love it. Let's go to Ulster. Queen consort of the people. I don't need the legitimacy, so I'll pay the money. We're already legit. Reykjavik. I didn't even. I forgot we had claims on Iceland. Oh well. I've already got colonies in the New World. Don't need it. This ex- this this deportation mechanic always messes with me. But yeah, we want to beat the Portuguese to Southern America. We want to take Florida so we can get the Florida man buff. And then, with a glorious army of Florida men, we will conquer the whole world. He's my favorite superhero. Much like Crocodile Dundee, whose superpower is being Australian, Florida Man's superpower is being Floridian. Believe it or not, it's a superpower. You know what? I'll take that. Finish that. Get naval force modify. Oh, there we go. Fabricate claims. Always useful. And we can start our golden era, but I might start it when this age is ending. And then I want to use that morale boost for conquering India, if I can even do that this game, considering how cursed it is. Yep, I'm glad I moved in here. Alright, king's dead. Long live the king. Hail to the chief, baby. And he's 41-year-old and doesn't have any kids. So he's the 40-year-old virgin. Great. You got rebels coming up. I don't know what I did to piss off RN Jesus, but here we go. I think I'll just take another idea. Goods produced will be useful for my economy later on. We're slowly making Anglicanism the religion of England. Muscovy Trade Company. That is actually something interesting that did happen historically. Is once the Russians really started expanding into, I believe this is the White Sea. Yeah, the White Sea. They established trade with Western Europe. And England was the main beneficiary of this because it was the closest major power to Russia. They also had something called the Pomorje trade with Norway that had been established in, I believe, the 16th or 17th century, and then just continued well until the end of the Russian Empire. When you get the rise of the Soviet Union, they weren't as friendly with the Norwegians or with anybody. Sorry, hit the mic. Got separatists in Ulster. Alright, that was easy enough. Do I become the defender of the faith? Why not? I'm the only Anglican country. Get a third missionary? I'll take this one and then I'll just focus on teching up, get the goods produced, boost my economy. Don't really want to go into debt. Also got whiskey brain right now, so Might have just made the wrong call. The Northern Rebellion. Queen Elizabeth I sought to bring a religious settlement with the objective of establishing England a Protestant Anglican church with herself as the supreme governor. Things began to fray around the edges when Mary, Queen of Scots, fled to England. The problem for Elizabeth I was that Mary was a Catholic claimant to the English throne. Elizabeth I had Mary locked away in various castles, but she still became the center of numerous conspiracies to overthrow the upstarts who had displaced the ancient aristocracy. Their basic idea was to marry Mary to Norfolk, England's only duke. This combination represented a serious threat to Elizabeth I, but Norfolk seemed undecided and continued to delay until Elizabeth I invited him to London, whereupon she locked him in the Tower. Elizabeth I suspected that the Earls of Northumberland, Westmoreland, and Cumberland were involved in the conspiracy and invited them to London as well. The Earls guessed their accommodation would be the Tower and opted instead for a rebellion that began at about midnight on 9th November 1569. The Catholic faith had survived in the north, and there was real resentment against the extension of Tudor domination and Elizabeth I's new men. The Earl of Northumberland mustered his troops in Richmond on 16th November. Sir George was appointed provost marshal, and martial law was declared. Elizabeth I ordered that 700 of the riffraff be executed. 200 of those were from or around Richmond. How many were actually executed is not known, but seemingly it was a smaller number, perhaps around 57, 12 of whom were from Richmond. A decade after the rebellion was a difficult period for Catholics who faced constant persecution. Religious meetings were held in secret, away from the eyes of unfriendly informants. It seems, however, that the few gentry who were accused in court of holding Catholic beliefs were the mere tip of the Great Pyramid, which represented a hidden underground movement. Keep Norfolk in the Tower. I have the stability. I don't really feel like fighting them. I'll release Norfolk. So that's actually something interesting is, yeah, Catholics were forced underground in Anglican England. And there's a common joke I've heard in England that Guy Fawkes was the only man ever to enter Parliament with honest intentions. He was a Catholic radical who planned to blow up a bomb under Parliament. Terrorist, obviously, but that's where the remember the 5th of November rhyme comes from. It was Guy Fawkes. It was his plot was on November 5th. Alright, got a self-sustaining colony in Connecticut. And I will send the new colonist. Anyway, so yeah, Guy Fawkes was a terrorist, a Catholic terrorist, who tried to destroy Parliament. And on Guy Fawkes Day, November 5th, they burn him in effigy. Sometimes they burn the Pope in effigy too, but I think that practice has largely fallen by the wayside. Yep, there goes the loan. Sorry, this mic beats the hell out of earbuds, but it is starting to make my ears hurt. Do let me know if you can hear the soundtrack. The soundtrack to this game is awesome. As far as I'm aware, it was recorded by the Symphony Orchestra of Stockholm. It is top 10 video game soundtracks ever. Like, it is really good. Hell, they even got Sabaton to do a collaboration, and if you're into history, check them out. They're one of my favorite bands. I've seen them live. They put on a hell of a show. Um, Historical metal. What's there not to love? Looks like we're going to get some separatists in Ireland again. Alright, we're getting back on track. That's not good. I'll have to work on that. I am working on it. I am learning this software. It's taken me some time. There it goes. Alright, we're going to start teching up soon. We're now behind. I got too focused on ideas, I think. Oh, there we go. Well, Russia has rivaled us. That's fun. Yeah, we don't want to state anything in the New Worlds because it'll just form its own colony soon enough. Alright, we're moving along with this religious thing. I like to think we're almost there, but we gotta get to 90% before the event ends. Or the disaster. Yeah, we need 90% religious unity. We're at 47%. Improvements in trade technology. Yep, I'll take those free Diplo points. It's weird that France hasn't absorbed all of Brittany yet. Usually they do that fairly quickly. Then again, I've seen games where Brittany lasts till the very end as this weird independent semi-Celtic, semi-French state. I've seen them colonize, actually. I've seen Breton Africa, which is bizarre. I've seen them take over parts of North America, too. House of Stanley, we got an heir, and he's terrible. I truly believe this run is cursed. Built a church in Oxford. Yeah, I wish I could see more of England. I've only ever been to London and Bath, and I highly recommend both. Bath is absolutely beautiful. Um, but I would like to see York. I actually might visit Scotland soon. I have an inn there maybe. Um, the most expensive thing when you travel is honestly lodging. The plane you can get flights cheap if you know where to look. There are some airlines that will do it for a couple $100, which is way better than you might be expecting. Um, I would say as when this pandemic is over, go travel, go see somewhere. It really is a life-changing experience. We have grain. It's not what I was hoping for. Tobacco is way more useful, but you can get it out of Eastern America. Yeah, what trade goods have we got? We got fur, we got tobacco, more fur. Yeah, tobacco is what we want. That's one of the most lucrative trade goods in North America. All right, slowly getting back on track here. We might be able to salvage this run. Might be. Don't know. Yeah, I'll just spend that money. Stability's worth it. Yeah, this run might be salvageable. It's been a very rough start with this England run. Abolition of feast days. Let them have their fun. See what's going on in Europe. The Thuringia, is that what the Palatinate did? I've never seen them do that. No, that's not what the Palatinate did. But Thuringia, I've never actually seen them get this big. Good on you, Thuringia. Good work. The Commonwealth is looking pretty beefy, but they have weak allies, so I wouldn't be surprised if Russia started gobbling them up. Just kind of what they did historically. Kazan is beefy, wow. Usually Russia has absorbed them by this point, or at least gotten pretty darn close to it. The Ottomans are weak. Wow, they haven't even united Anatolia. They haven't even united the Turks. Hell, the Trebizond, and we're back down to negative prestige. Trebizond, the Byzantine rump state, is still hanging around into the 16th century. That is something. Yeah, they might have nerfed the Ottomans too hard. Fort Charlotte. Gotta go back. Yeah, this would not have happened historically. Portugal was only ever really present in the New World in Brazil. They most of Portugal's colonies were coastal trade cities in Africa, not New World colonies. Brazil was the only one, really, was the only Portuguese presence in the New World, despite the fact that they were even before the Spanish as a global empire. And for a little while, Portugal was one of the dominant world powers. It just wasn't that long of a period of time. They never had the population Spain did to be able to export people. So they had to rely on what was called a trade post empire, which kind of predicted what the Dutch did. That was the Dutch Empire was very much a trade post empire because the Netherlands never had the same kind of population as their peers. So they had to rely on establishing a number of trade outposts and using their naval might to secure a lucrative trade empire. There was a bit like Venice is honestly the precursor to all trading post empires because Venice, from one little city in the Adriatic, used to control, well, all of this region called the Veneto, which they've lost in this game, but they controlled a number of ports along the coast of modern-day Croatia. They controlled the islands of Corfu, Naxos, Crete. They had an influence in Cyprus as well, and that was kind of the blueprint for a trading post empire. Now, France, Britain, and Spain all had the populations to export massive amounts of their population to the New World. So they could establish large traditional territorial empires over there where a smaller country like the Portuguese or the Dutch really couldn't. Um, that's why. Oh, there we go. We can get a new colonist. I'll placate the clergy, bribe an MP. I love how that's just an option, like just acceptable corruption. Um, promote meritocracy, and ignore corruption. And I probably need one more. Praise local regiments. There we go. Second colonist. Don't even have the idea for it yet. But I do know what we're doing. We are colonizing more of the Americas. I'll go to Manhattan, train up some additional infantry, and change my units around. That is true though. England discovered the much more efficient method of colonization, which is just tax the economies of the colonial nations you set up. As I said, that's why the English were better at it than the Spaniards might have figured out how to do it first, but the English were way better at it. All right, there we go. Move you two down to Manhattan. There's this old phrase that I love that I discovered one time doing research for the podcast, which went something like making money is as natural to a Dutchman as burning witches is to a Spaniard. Because the Dutch didn't convert, they didn't really do much territorial conquest. They pretty much just directed trade and got stupidly rich off of it. Rich enough to be able to spend their life fortunes on tulips. Also, that's a lot of parliamentary seats, but they are useful for the local economy. It does get difficult passing things though. And that would be a useful thing to do once I've colonized a lot of stuff, because I do like the extra colonist bonus you can get through Parliament. There goes Russia. They'll probably take all of Finland. There we go, level 2 center of trade. I think I might do that. That sounds interesting. Yeah, I'm not really an I like this period. I like studying this period, but I'm not an expert on this period, really. For me, the older the better. That is true. They are cheap for what you get for them. But no, for me, generally, the older the better. My focus in college was on East Asia. I studied Imperial China and Japan mostly. But in recent years, I've taken a real interest in the medieval era, and I did a whole series on the Crusades based entirely on that interest in the medieval era. My first series even was on early medieval Europe, which I don't think gets enough credit. It kind of gets obscured. Oh, that's not good. They're probably gonna eat up further. Anyway, so yeah, my first series was on early medieval Europe, roughly the fall of the Roman Empire to the. I mean, pretty much. England was very hands off on their colonies to the point where they just became new countries on their own. Um, well, granted, Australia and New Zealand were an interesting case because they developed their own cultural identities during World War One with the Anzac Corps in the British Army, because the British deployed almost all of their men to the front on World War One, right along here, and they didn't have many men for the Turkish front and for the global colonial wars, right? So they needed expendable infantry, and they found that expendable infantry in the Irish, the Indians, the Australians, and New Zealanders. So when the British need to make their nice suicidal attack on the Dardanelles, who do they send but the Irish, the Australians, and the New Zealanders? The Indians were there too, but they were largely deployed across the colonies. Um, Actually, several leaders of the Irish War for Independence were there at Gallipoli. Parnell was probably the most prominent, but he was there. He served in the British Army at Gallipoli, and that war kind of spurred the, it kind of finalizes the development of the Australian and the New Zealanders as their own nations. Also, yes, yeah, no, there's actually this great footage from World War II. There's this great documentary called World War II in Color that I really recommend. They colorized and use color footage from the Second World War, and there's this great shot of a bunch of Indian troops in British uniforms with turbans walking in front of the pyramids of Giza. It's a great shot. But really, watch World War II in color. It is one of the best World War II documentaries you can find on Netflix right now. It's one of the few World War II documentaries I've seen that really goes into the Spanish Civil War, which is one of the most important conflicts that most people know nothing about. The Spanish Civil War was World War II in microcosm. You had fascists, you had communists, and you had liberal republics, all fighting with each other. And I mean, the key difference came down to the fact that Franco was much better at unifying the rightist factions than the. Oh, it was. It was on there just recently. Um, but Franco was much better at uniting the rightists than the leftists were, and the leftists wound up eating themselves. They fought with each other and destroyed each other, and the right wingers were able to uh, consolidate control over Spain. But you're right, though. Actually, a lot of German tank divisions got experience in. Actually, I'll go. Do I want to help Sweden? I'll help Sweden. But a lot of German tank divisions got experience fighting in Spain, because it was kind of this ideological proxy war between the communists, the fascists, and I mean, the French kind of helped the Republicans, but they kind of half-assed it. The French weren't really putting a whole lot of effort into helping the Spanish. Interestingly enough, George Orwell was there, and Ernest Hemingway. Both of them were present. Yes, it was. Yes, it was. They really tested tank warfare in combination with close air support and with the Luftwaffe there. But George Orwell went to Spain to fight for the communists, and he actually got disillusioned with communism while he was there, and he starts writing 1984 when he gets home. And Ernest Hemingway was also there. He was a journalist reporting on the war, and he wrote "For Whom the Bell Tolls," based on what he saw in Spain. It really was a miserable war. You have the right wingers purging left wingers. You have the left wingers purging right wingers, and the clergy in particular. There were several massacres. Also, yes, yeah, it was one of the weird times where the U.S. and the Soviet Union actually kind of worked together. Though it wasn't the U.S. government, it was a lot of Americans went over there. Also, yes, it was a lot of Spain was ravaged by the war, which is civil wars are the worst kind. Nobody really wins because you and the Bretons are colonizing America. That's weird. Well, on that note, I think I'm going to end it for tonight. I will see you all next Sunday, and I'm Batman 75028. We should do a multiplayer stream sometime. Um, Just I'm free most weeknights. But that's about it for me. I'm getting tired, and I got work tomorrow. So have a good night, everybody. Renegade Historian signing off.